This show is part of the RetroZap.com podcast network.
What's up, ARGonauts, and welcome to another Retro Gaming Podcast. This is episode 91 of the ARGcast. I am your host, David Gilton, and with me is a man who understands the concept of love, Robert Workman.
Yeah, how's it going? It's me. I'm not going to do the whole thing because we're going to be here all hour. But yes, indeed, we've got some Jet Set Radio news for you. It's a new year! And same old shit, but still, it's a new year. So
Indeed.
And we've got a couple of great guests. We have one who's returning yet again, and we also have a new guest. So who we got, David?
Yeah, so with us is Rob McCallum. So I'll just hi there, Rob.
Hello, gentlemen. It's good to be back.
Welcome back, Mr. McSee.
Yeah,
Here we go. Already,
we've had you on like a very early episode of ARGcast to talk about your documentary box art, which I know is still due to come out, along with like other like amazing documentary like projects that you're working on at the moment. So really excited to have you back on. But we also have on here our good friend Joe Granato.
Greetings, everyone.
Wow, and I thought my voice was creepy. Holy crap!
it's bedtime for me. I gotta go home.
Yeah,
Voice actor
this
in
show
the
was
midst.
great. Thank you, everybody. Please listen on RetroZap.com.
That's right. So Joe, like you're basically here so as to talk about the new 8-Bit Heroes, which is like the documentary that's coming out. That's basically you making like your dream game, your dream NES game of all things, and also like to talk about the the tool that's being used in order to make NES games, which is NESmaker, which is really exciting news. So really happy to have you on board here.
You're excited. Feel these nipples.
Yeah. Get cut
I
glass,
helped
man.
them, gentlemen.
That's all
You don't
you.
wanna miss out.
That's all you, Rob. That's all you.
I've been all over Joe's nipples, and I gotta tell you, in the desert, you don't turn anything away.
Make a documentary about that.
And I'll tell you what, Rob, it was cold in the desert that day.
It's an ARGcast scoop right here. Jeez.
Wow.
That's the stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor, guys.
Everybody that gets the Blu-ray copy will get to see those nipples.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
so is the sequel going to be called the new 8-Bit Nipples?
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's going to be Nipple Quest. It'll be a crossover spin-off with Nintendo Quest.
What it is actually is that somebody is taking over the IP and they're going in a new direction. They decided to go the Schumacher angle and put everyone's suit to have bat nipples on them. So it'll be somebody playing me, but he'll have nipples because that's a good creative decision according to Joel Schumacher.
Right, because we're making this for the kids, obviously. So right. We have to keep the kids in mind for this, and to keep like our retro gaming audience in mind too. Like I figure we kind of kick us off with some exciting news here, and some news actually that I didn't hear about until recently, but this kind of broke out in the middle of December. Was that there is a new Jet Set Radio title that was being made, or at least that was being pitched anyway to Sega, called Jet Set Radio Evolution. So this was pretty exciting to see, just because it's just like the an idea for a new Jet Set Radio game, and I know for like a lot of fans of of the Dreamcast original that it would be really cool to see a new Jet Set Radio game, but like I guess I'm just kind of curious on what all of you think on this idea for Jet Set Radio Evolution. From like the trailer that showed, it wasn't even like kind of like a trailer, it's kind of like a proof of concept basically, which they did show to Sega, but then Sega decided to turn it down. So I don't know, I guess like starting with with like Robert here, do you think that it was like warranted, I guess, for Sega to turn this down? Could there be a better idea for Jet Set Radio, or should Sega have pulled the trigger on this?
See, no, I mean, Sega is all about bringing back their old franchises. I thought they were talking at one point about, well, we want to bring back the franchises that people love, because we have 16-bit Sonic with Sonic Mania and all that stuff. So I mean, like, here was an Austin-based studio, Dinosaur Games. They wanted to make a new Jet Set Radio. Why not? We haven't seen a new game in the series since Future? So
Yeah.
it's been ages since we've seen anything of it, and a lot of people loved it based upon what they've seen. They said Sony loved it. And, when the video went online, I got a lot of love from the Jet Set Radio community. I actually follow a guy on Twitter who goes by the name, Professor K. And he has a community that's been avid about it. Be like, Sega, what the hell are you doing? Are you an idiot? What's going on? You allow this to be canned, but you make Valkyrie a revolution. What's wrong with you? That sort of deal. So, I mean, the feedback I've seen thus far has been massive, and maybe Sega's paying attention, and maybe they're working on their own Jet Set Radio game. But
That's my hope.
Seriously,
yeah,
me too. But I mean, for now, it's kind of interesting to see what could have been, because Dinosaur Games, they seem to have the vibe down in terms of how Jet Set Radio is supposed to work with its open world environment and its trick system and everything like that. And I don't know, I kind of hope maybe in the future Sega will reconsider and we'll see, Jet Set Radio Super Future. I don't know what they're going to call it, but
right.
maybe Evolution. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen this. But as far as turning it down, people turn down projects for the weirdest reasons. I saw this concept video the other day of a Star Wars game that was being developed by the team that did the Rebel Galaxy games, and it was supposed to be like a Rogue Squadron style shooter, and it was supposed to be made for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, but EA turned that down as well. Developers apparently don't have the funds to make these great games, and it kind of sucks, because these could, when a developer takes a chance on the game or a publisher takes a chance on the game, it could pay off in spades sometimes. That's not 100%, but you never know until you try.
Yeah, if it doesn't have loot boxes, I don't think EA is interested in moving forward with that.
Don't.
Just look at like 1313 and like the Emmy Hennig project also. Obviously they did not have like loot boxes in mind for that, but obviously they did with Battlefront 2, and you see like how that turned out like from the previous year. So Rob, Joe, I was kind of curious on what your thoughts are on this new Jet Set Radio concept.
First of all, I had to wrap my head around the fact that Jet Set Radio is actually considered a retro franchise at this point. I blink
Right.
an eye and I realized, man, I guess it was a while ago when it first came out. I did look at the video. We're talking about Joel Schumacher. There's certainly enough neon in that to make him a candidate for being a part of the project. I don't know. I'll firmly believe that Sega wants to bring their great franchises back for their quote unquote hardcore fan base when we get a Skies of Arcadia sequel.
Right.
Man, Rob's really on a fix for Joel Schumacher lately. What's going on?
Yeah.
I'm in Canada, and there's 3 feet of snow right now, okay? The nipples are out in full force.
We're about to get buried over here in Boston, too. It's like we have like a 15-inch like storm coming in. So.
Yeah, well, you saw all the snow that hit Erie. We got it before it hit Erie, so we got a little less than them, but we got the same jet stream.
Yeah.
Jet stream radio.
There you go. Radio. There you go. You got a new idea there, Sega. Joe, I was kind of curious in your thoughts there for Jet Set Radio Evolution.
Sort of the same thing. Not so much about that game in particular, but just some of the franchises that are now sort of considered retro, like Rob was saying, and we're seeing a resurgence, feeling older and older. And it's not just video games. I'm noticing this with movies, and I'm noticing this with music a lot. Like I put this in context. So when I was, really getting into music in the early 90s and stuff like that, right? So, to me, classic rock was like music from the 70s and mid 70s and stuff like that. That would make Chevelle a classic rock band.
Yeah.
Right now, like things like that are really messing with my head. Like that doesn't make any sense, that, and that's sort of where we are. So I think that's fascinating. I look at these games. I look at a game like Jet Set Radio, and to me, it doesn't feel like something that's got a resurgence, because it doesn't feel like it's been long enough. Time has passed for that to be a big deal. But it has. It absolutely has.
It has. Yeah. Time,
but
time is kind of like a fickle thing. Nostalgia is kind of like a weird thing like that. It'll just kind of like warp, just like I don't know, just like our thought as far as like how long ago something has been, and like certainly with Jet Set Radio being there in the Dreamcast era, that was like early 2000s right there. So it's kind of nuts like to kind of think about, but yeah.
I actually have a really relevant one that's totally goes off gaming for a second again, but it's relevant for tonight because it's X-Files related.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right, and the new X-Files, and I haven't watched it yet, so I'm waiting for my wife. So this one kind of bugged me out a little bit. So in the first season of X-Files, Mulder was supposed to be 25 years old, okay? And he had seen his sister abducted when he was 12, That was the reality of that series, right? So basically, for 13 years of his life, those 13 years informed his character and made him who he was, and the character that we knew his entire life was based on those experiences in those formative 13 years, right? It's been way longer than 13 years since the show's been off the air.
That's true.
So for that character, more time has passed between the end of the episode at the X-Files and now, and when he saw his sister abducted in his childhood and the beginning of the show that we know as the X-Files. Just like my brain thinks about those things, and I don't know why, but I don't know. So.
Yeah, again, it's just like just like that time kind of passing by, and I guess it's kind of to get away with us. And like as you mentioned there, like with you're thinking of like 70s rock, like as far as like being like classic like music and everything. Now you look at like music from the 90s is considered classic now. So like and,
the music from the 2000s is classic rock now by the same metric. It's like, huh?
Absolutely.
No, hold on. If you want to feel old, check out 1985 Pee-wee movie versus 2016 Pee-wee movie. There you go. That's age catching up with you.
It's fair right there. It's
oh
fair.
my God.
Yeah. But yeah, like in regards to like Jet Set Radio, Jet Set Radio Evolution, like the guys over there at Dinosaur Games who kind of like pitched this idea anyway. They kind of like mentioned here like that they had an idea for the combat, as well as like the fact that they approached Sony originally, like which is like the like renders of like the models basically of like the characters in there, like with Beats and Gum. And just kind of show like what the designs of these characters look like. And so Sony appeared to be interested in it, but they wanted to see obviously like the game in motion. So that's where they kind of came up with this like proof of concept more or less of the game. I know for me personally, like I am a huge Jet Set Radio fan, and like it would be really cool to see a new Jet Set Radio game. I feel like it should take a more radical approach as opposed to what I consider to be like more of like a safe approach as this is. Obviously, like they have like classic Jet Set Radio music kind of playing with the understand the concept of love, and like with just with the like the way that they move and everything. Actually, like the way that they move is kind of interesting too, because like the game almost like kind of feels like it's underwater a bit. Like there's no real sense of speed from the proof of concept, which kind of fails a little bit as a proof of concept because Jet Set Radio is meant to be like a pretty fast moving game in general. So I don't know. Like, I would like to see more of what they could learn from this, but obviously, I think they would need to kind of go with a completely different approach, maybe a completely original IP in this case, as opposed to Jet Set Radio if they're not going to get Sega's blessing.
Well, you never say never. I mean, look at Mega Man. We thought that series was dead for a few years, and boom, Mega Man 11.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you like never know, and who knows? Maybe Sega is working on their own idea for a Jet Set Radio sequel. I can only hope, but for now, like we like all we have is like this, as well as like there's like a few other fan projects out there, but this is kind of like the most recent one that's kind of been making the the rounds and everything. So so like aside from that too, there is there is actually like a couple of compilations that are coming out actually for R-Type, and also like a release for Holy Diver as well, which is like a game that you don't hear all too often.
Yeah, I actually did a report on this over at comicbook.com/gaming. R-Type's making a comeback with a compilation called R-Type Returns, which is being done by our friends over there at Retrobit. The guys that we discussed earlier are bringing back the Sega Saturn, the Dreamcast, and the Sega Genesis accessories for this year. It'll be a compilation that includes 2 classic Super NES shooters in one package, Super R-Type and R-Type 3, the Third Lightning. And both this package and Holy Diver will feature a limited edition dust-free cartridge, a collectible retail box, a full-color instructional manual, limited edition lithographs, a pin set, a sticker set, a certificate of authenticity. I mean, it's a dream package for R-Type fans. Although the cartridge does look a little weird. It looks like
it's kind of funky, yeah.
A pink explosion, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like a black cartridge, but it has like, I don't know, pink stripes basically along the sides of it. It's almost like kind of like tiger stripes kind of thing.
Yeah, but it is neat to see R-Type get that attention because I know they had the rights to the IRM series, and I'm hearing that they're also going to re-release those games and other games for Nintendo Switch and other platforms as well as part of the Arcade Archive series, which is good. And then there's Holy Diver. It's sort of like a Castlevania-esque adventure that never really saw its way to the States. Retrobit will be releasing a compilation with that also includes a cartridge, manual, all these other goodies and everything like that. There's no release date for these yet, but they're coming sometime this year. So you can keep tabs on a website there, Castlemania Games. That's actually the name of the company, Castlemania. Go figure. And you can find that link next to our episode there. So by all means, check that out and keep tabs. I know I will be, because I do need some R-Type love.
Yeah, and these are pretty sweet, like just collectibles, like just like, with everything, especially with the cartridges that they have here. Like I know with the Holy Diver one, actually they have like an NES style cartridge with like the sleeve and everything, which is pretty sweet. So.
Yeah, you want to talk about feeling old. Ronnie James Dio's Holy Diver is what, 30-something years old?
Every time you said it, I mean, I know the game, but that's all I'm saying.
I know, right?
I shouldn't have done that.
You can see his stripes, but you can't run.
I do have a 1-year-old baby sleeping right in the next room. I have no idea why I did it. That was the stupidest thing I could have done. So. But then again,
it would have been stupider if you did it with your wife home.
Yeah. If he actually comes out like rocking the devil horns, then then it was a win. Then it was a win. So.
He's handling the guitar solo. He's guitar solo.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there's some really exciting collectibles there. So they'll definitely be on the lookout for that. But then there's also like a story that I believe you also broke out there, Robert, like in regards to Konami.
Yeah, what it is, there's a rumor that we're going to be getting a Nintendo Direct this month that's going to lay out Nintendo's plans for at least the first half of the year. We're hearing all sorts of rumors from that, but this is an interesting one that I came across. Konami could be re-releasing its WiiWare games for re-releasing Nintendo Switch in a 4-pack. The package will include Castlevania: The Adventure Rebirth, Contra Rebirth, Gradius Rebirth, and a yet unmentioned 4th title. Now, anybody who played the Wii or the Wii U realizes that these Rebirth games are actually a lot of fun. They were really well done in terms of downloadable games. They were only $10 each. So, seeing them again in Nintendo Switch would give a much bigger audience, would bring back the games that obviously Konami's not going to work on anymore because Metal Gear survived for some damn reason. And it'll be great to see those games again. What I'm curious about is what the 4th title is. This is rumored to be another classic game making a comeback. Personally, I'm hoping for Axelay Rebirth. Oh, yeah. Because I did love Axelay on Super NES. So fingers crossed we'll see some announcement from that whenever the Nintendo Direct special does happen. But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see these games would make a comeback. I mean, it would obviously not hurt. It would make Konami money, especially if they sold it for what, $20 or so. I mean, it'd be a hell of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, and I think like more than anything too, it would like put them, at least a little bit closer into good graces of like your average gamer, honestly, because obviously with like the PR and everything, Konami's had like a bit of like a nightmare ever since the whole Kojima debacle kind of going on. So anything that could put them in the good graces of gamers' minds is certainly welcome. So this is like certainly a way of doing that. Although I have no idea what this 4th title might be.
How do we?
It's going to be Blades of Steel Rebirth, isn't it? Come on.
A Blades of Steel Rebirth, I'd be all for, honestly. Yeah, maybe we could have like a twin pack with like Blades of Steel and Double Dribble. In that case, just have like a sports pack of like Konami games.
Nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely want to see something like that.
Wasn't Double Dribble Acclaim though?
No, it was Konami.
Okay. Wow. No. NBA Jam was Acclaim for a little while until
yeah. That was their thing for sure. But yeah, no, like it's pretty exciting to see that. And I personally haven't like played have these like Rebirth games like come out like before? Is that what it is? Like I'm like trying to understand exactly like
no.
What they are.
Well, the WiiWare games came out for the Wii Virtual Con. Well, they're downloadable on the Nintendo Wii. Okay. Like they have their little eShop there, and you could get the games there. You can also get them through the Wii U as well.
So this would be re-releases of like these already re-released games, more or less, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're not re-releases. These were originally programmed games for the Wii that took advantage of the classic games, but they were made like new.
Okay, I gotcha.
Contra Rebirth has fresh bosses. Castlevania: The Adventure Rebirth is a brand new game. I mean, they're new games. They're just called Rebirth because they're based upon their classic 8-bit properties.
Gotcha. All right.
So they're new games.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just gonna throw like a wild claim then and say that the 4th game is gonna be like a Frogger Rebirth in that case.
How many times is Frogger gonna come back? Just hit him with the car. Come on.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough little froggy there. So, so that's like the news right there. So that's gonna lead us now into the part of the show called "What Are You Playing?" It gets into games we've all been playing or have recently beat. So we'll start off with Rob, then Joe, and then like the rest of us here. So Rob, what have you been playing?
I found myself digging back into Evolve for the short play sessions and the fact that my son loves monsters. So we've been spending a lot of time playing Evolve, and I guess the only other video game that I've been playing around with is Mutant Football League, since I'm working with the guys at Digital Dreams. I'm cutting the trailer for the console release that I know Robert mentioned in an article today. So that'll be coming out in a couple weeks. So between those two games, there's lots of monsters going on in my house these days.
Yeah, for sure. And we're actually like really close with Michael Mendheim, like who's obviously like heading that project and everything. So it's really cool to see more of that game as it gets closer to launch and everything. It's looking really good, and it's always like a showstopper too. Every time it's shown at like conventions, like every time I pass by and I see Michael there and everything, there's always like just a crowd of people just like wanting to see like every single gruesome hit in that game. It's a lot of fun.
I gotta tell you, I hit one of those career moments when we were working on the trailer, and I wrote it with Michael, and we came up with a bunch of dialogue, and Tim Kitzrow is doing a lot of the narration for it. So to have the guy who's like the voice behind NBA Jam, like reading some of the things that you wrote, was pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie.
It's really awesome. Yeah, like it really kind of gives like I guess like some satisfaction, kind of like seeing having like your lines read by someone with like such an iconic voice like that for sure. Joe, how about you? What have you been playing?
What am I playing?
You better plug. This is your plug opportunity.
This is your chance.
Oh God, I can't wait until the day where I can play video games again, and that's not going to happen until this one that is I'm creating, and all the other ones that are being created as part of this whole thing are into the world. So for anyone who thinks that I'm just dragging my feet or dilly-dally, no, it's just the suck of my life. It's just eating my soul. But good things are coming out of it. So no, honestly, when I've been taking a break, I've been sticking to games on the NES just so I don't taint my expectations of what I should be able to do with NESmaker or the modules that I'm creating. And I've been going back and playing some of the old RPGs just to sort of get in that headspace and think about how to have some verisimilitude with our RPG engine, things that RPGs must do on the NES, but maybe some different functionality that people might want. So I've been going back and playing some of the old RPGs and having fun with that. That's been my.
That sounds like a wise use of time, Joe.
And I wonder who I'd be doing that for.
I have no idea.
No idea why I'd be looking at RPGs so much.
It's not playtime; it's homework, is what it is.
That's what's been sucking about it is that's exactly what it feels like sometimes is like, okay, well today I got to put in 4 hours into this. It's no longer like, I just 5 more minutes. No. It's like, okay.
5 more minutes.
Yeah. So, and that's, I sound like a bitch when I'm saying that, and whatever. Things are going awesome. It's just also grueling, mind-numbing sitting in front of a computer work. I want to have like a treadmill or a something active. Like if there was a way to use motion controls to be doing assembly programming, so I could get up and move and also that would be amazing. Yeah. But yeah, so no, nothing exciting on this front for a while. And I haven't even touched a Switch yet. I kind of said when I started this project, I was going to put all of my consoles except for the NES in the closet until this project's done. Since then, the Switch came out, Breath of the Wild came out. I haven't even been able to touch that yet, and I'm just sticking to my guns and building games. So I guess Mystic Searches is what I'm playing. That's the last game I played.
Exactly. Yeah, I was like waiting. Well, I was waiting for that for that name plug. I'd like to kind of throw in there. So yeah. So with Mystic Searches, what can you say about it as far as just from having played it and tested it and obviously making it too.
Yeah. So it's awesome, man. It's like the best game ever. No. It's we wanted it. Again, with that idea of verisimilitude, it's an adventure game for the NES. Okay. Well, we wanted to make it feel like a NES adventure game, but what are we offering? It's not a clone. We didn't want it to be a Zelda clone or a Willow clone or a Star Tropics clone. You could see evidence of those types of games in it, but we wanted it to feel slightly different. And one of the things in the original illustrations from when I was a kid was the fact that it was a top-down game like Zelda, but the character could jump too. And at the time, we didn't really have the concept of just how difficult that would be to tackle or what kind of mechanics you would have to create in a 2D space to have a sort of top-down game that had a jumping mechanic. And that's something that I think is really unique. If you ever played Gremlins 2 on the NES,
Oh yeah.
that was a great game that had like a third dimension and yet was a top-down game. And so there's that. It's a large game for a NES game. It's more than twice the size of the original Legend of Zelda, and it is based on finding secrets and things. So it is, it's hopefully going to be a pretty long playthrough for people playing through it for the first time, and it encourages adventuring and exploring and looking for those secrets. It's not just a linear narrative; it's very nonlinear. We finally finished the music. We crammed in 16 songs. So there's actually 16 songs. I had to actually simplify a few just so we could get all 16. I don't know. What else do you guys want to know?
Well, I can tell you first and foremost, I've actually had a chance to play an early build of Mystic Searches, and it's awesome. It feels so good. I don't even know how to communicate it more than that. It feels genuine. It feels unique. It'll make you feel like a kid on Christmas morning when you put that in, and you get some sort of an experience that you haven't had in gaming for decades.
Well,
I just really haven't.
Well, I know one thing with this game in particular is that it is actually made with the limitations of the NES in mind. So like there isn't any sort of with the sense or feel of like 8-bit or 16-bit gaming, like how say like Shovel Knight is, for example. Sure. A game like that obviously can't be made on like the original hardware and everything. But this game, with like Mystic Searches, obviously is in this case.
It is made for the system. It's not a proxy. It's not a game that's trying to stay in the style of NES games. It is straight up NES game.
Yeah. Well, I think of all the time you would have saved if it was just in the style, Joe.
Oh my God, I could have done it in a long weekend. I'm not even joking. If I'd had my artist build the assets and we didn't have to worry about like getting it in the same format as the NES every time, and he could just make revisions on the fly, we could build the whole game in Unity in a week, 2 weeks, but what's interesting, and it's interesting being at this end of the tunnel, where the game's almost finished. Almost, we're putting quotes around that. But when we're on this side of the tunnel, and like the memory banks are all filling up, and now we're just juxtaposing data and getting a narrative in and stuff like that. We're on this side of the tunnel, and looking back, all of the sort of limitations that we ended up facing, and we had to make these really hard decisions, and we had to keep doing these things. It ended up causing us to have all these moments of ingenuity that ended up shaping the narrative or ended up shaping the mechanics of the game that we probably would have never thought of if we had not been struck with those limitations. So in that way, it's actually, I think it's a perfect what am I trying to say? It's a perfect example. Well, no, yeah, right. No, will not be. But it's a perfect artifact of the way this system does games. And so it's been really interesting to sort of have to relearn how to program a video game for this system.
Very cool, yeah. Like, and it is kind of interesting to kind of, again, like, with the fact that you are making it with the limitations of, of like the original like hardware in mind and everything, and obviously like that's kind of making for like the narrative for like the documentary that's coming out with the new 8-bit heroes. So I'm definitely really curious to kind of see, I guess, like all the struggles you kind of had to deal with in order to kind of make it all work. But it is great to kind of see it all come together.
What's fun is the documentary probably scratches, and I'm not exaggerating, about 1% of the actual challenges of creating the game and creating the engine, because we don't really focus on that in the documentary. It's we filmed 7 terabytes of footage, a lot of footage, 3 years worth of footage, jet setting all over the country, and we had no idea the film that we were making. We set out to make a film that was going to be sort of a novelty project about making a game for a 30-year-old console. Oh, it's got a niche audience. It'll be fun. This will appeal to some people. And we have no idea if we're even going to be able to do it, but I think we can. So let's film it.
Yeah.
And it becomes something completely different. It goes off the rails pretty early on. And when I started to edit it, I made an edit based on what I thought it was supposed to be about. And it was about a 4-hour edit, and it was horrible. It was just a miserable film, and it didn't work at all, and it wasn't fun to watch, even for somebody who's interested. And I took a step back and I started recutting a little bit, and I put everything in folders thematically instead of chronologically, and I stopped trying to focus on like the story of how this game came to be, and I just started to focus on like the themes that are sort of explored in each section. And I put like-minded themes together, even if they didn't happen chronologically. And all of a sudden, oh my God, there's a perfect hero's journey narrative. Like I know what the story is about. I know what the story sort of means to me as a filmmaker now, and I never put it together. And it really becomes a story about the value of the ambitions that you have as a kid that you sort of shed, that you get rid of as sort of a rite of passage to become an adult. And what happens, what are the unexpected consequences of reintroducing those into your adult life? And that's sort of what the story becomes much more about than about just making the game. And what we've been hearing, which has been super validating from audiences and critics and things, is that you don't have to like video games at all to get something out of this film. If you're a creative of any type, if you've ever made something, if you're an artist or a musician, or ever aspired to be a writer or whatever, this film sort of has spoken to them. We even had the reviewer of the Baltimore Sun called me on the phone in our hotel room when we were up there last year, and it was like, I just finished the film. It's funny, I don't care about video games at all, but I'd made a comic book when I was 13, and all of a sudden I'm compelled to make another issue of that comic book for some reason, and like that's the kind of most validating feedback I can conceive of,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that sounds like the best filmmaking process ever, though. I mean, like when you intend to do one certain thing with the direction of the film and it goes a completely different way. Like, tell me the last time Michael Bay discovered that shit. Like, never.
Right. When I stopped trying to force the film to be something and let it be what it is, it actually worked. It actually became something that I'm actually really proud of.
Yeah, and we'll like certainly get more like into the film, like with the with like the main.
Oh yeah,
topic
we're
and
still in the
everything.
middle of our intro.
For sure, we are. Yeah, for sure. I just want to make sure we kind of
I don't know the
correct
format. Well, technically,
it's
I
all
think
good.
we were in the news, and that's news.
Yeah, we were talking about what we were playing, and now I
playing,
forgot
what we were playing.
and,
Yeah, but we'll definitely get more like into the film and like everything else that you're working on for sure. But because I know there's like plenty to talk about for sure with it.
In all fairness, that long diatribe is why I'm not playing video games. So I guess it's relevant.
It makes
It's
sense.
very
It makes
relevant
sense.
for sure. Yeah.
It definitely fits. It's exciting stuff, and we will dig more into it, obviously. But it'd be like, what are you playing? Well, my game. Oh,
Yeah.
great!
And I guess I'll go to what I'm playing just real quick here, just because it's not really anything like all too different if you know me all that well enough. So obviously I've been playing more Overwatch and everything. So like season 8 I believe started. So I've just been kind of playing that, and have like my regular people like who I play with on there. So just been kind of like doing whatever I can on my side to kind of help our squad level up there, get that SR rank up. And aside from that, too, also been playing Pyre. Actually, I recently beat Pyre, which is like the latest game by Supergiant Games. And honestly, I wish I beat this game before we had our previous episode, Robert, because otherwise this would have definitely been a game I would have talked about on the on that like best of and worst of episode and everything. This is like an absolute treat. Like I absolutely love it. I remember falling in love with this game when it was first revealed at PAX East. What was it? A couple of years ago, I want to say.
Yeah.
Back in 2015, or 2016, I think. Yeah, 2016. But yeah, it was it's just a really, really cool game. Basically, it's kind of like an RPG sports game in a lot of ways, just with the really cool and unique fantasy setting to it, where you have people who are outlawed into basically a purgatory, more or less, who are trying to regain their freedom. And the way that the story unfolds, the way that the characters kind of like change, and also just like falling in love with like certain characters too, like just like with Ruki, I'm absolutely a huge fan of Ruki in that game. Jodariel is really cool and endearing, and there's also like who's basically kind of like the Wanderer, more or less. There's a young female character who you actually name in the game, and like the way that you name her is you basically pick like any number from the alphabet. Followed by AE, so it could be like Bay or Day or J if you pick X or whatever. So of course I had to name her Bay, and like it's she was just like really cool, like a really endearing character because like she's just kind of seen as this insane girl who just kind of sees visions and like thinks that like the gods are kind of talking to her and everything. And the more you learn about her, the more you kind of learn that like she's just really kind of this beacon of positivity in a world that kind of it kind of feeds into hopelessness more than anything. So it's really, really cool, interesting game. I highly recommend it. If you liked Bastion, if you like Transistor, this game is very different from those, and for all the right reasons, really, because it's just Supergiant just kind of flexing their creative muscle, utilizing the amazing artwork, the amazing sound, like sound and music from like previous games, but with like a completely different type of game, and definitely one I can't recommend enough. So Pyre, definitely check that one out. So
yeah, I mean that was one of my favorite games last year, and I highly recommend it as well. It is different from Bastion and Transistor. It's sort of like a team-based thing, but it's really cool.
Yes,
like how well it's put together. So yeah.
So how about you there, Robert?
I've been digging into the classic stuff. Versus Super Mario Brothers came out for the Nintendo Switch.
Oh, yeah.
This is probably the first time we saw the Versus version come out for our console, I believe. Some elements made it into Super Mario Brothers 2: The Lost Levels, but this is a more challenging version of the classic Super Mario Brothers game. Like, the levels are a little different as you go on in later levels. It's a lot more difficult than you think it is, but it's very well done for the Switch. Like, Arcade Archives and Nintendo did a great job recreating the arcade code and making it fun to play both in handheld and console mode. So it's only $8, and if you need like something for your post Super Mario Odyssey fix, I highly recommend it. And I had a little extra money on my Nintendo eShop account, thanks Mom, mainly because Christmas. But I picked up a couple of games for the Wii U because I wanted to pick up a couple more classic titles to play either on my tablet or on the screen. I picked up Lords of Thunder and ARGonauts. These are easily two of my favorite games for the Turbo Duo library. I actually had the WiiWare versions already, but I wanted versions that I could play on the Wii U without having to mess with a remote. So I picked up those versions. They were like $3 each. They're actually really cheap right now, and they're both a lot of fun. Lords of Thunder, of course, has one of the best soundtracks, one of the best rock soundtracks you can listen to while playing a shmup. And then ARGonauts is kind of innovative because of its power-ups. Like you can combine your forces with a cow and shoot milk bottles. You could combine your forces with a dog and just go bow, 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 and use the words to damage your enemies. It's bizarre, but it's bizarrely awesome. It's one of my favorite shmups of all time. So I've been messing with those games a little bit, and I've also been playing Zeo Drifter. Zeo Drifter is a game from Renegade Kid. It's a Metroid-style clone. It's just got announced for Nintendo Switch, so I dubbed back into the PlayStation 4 version for a little bit. And it's not as in-depth as Axiom Verge. It's more of a cartoon-style Metroid game, but it's really cool. And you can actually get it right now on sale, I believe, for just a few bucks. So that one's a lot of fun as well. I mean, other than that, I'm just patiently waiting for Dragon Ball FighterZ and Monster Hunter World to grace my console.
Yes, Monster Hunter I know is coming out this month, and Dragon Ball is going to be next month. So
actually, yeah. Dragon Ball's this month.
Oh, is it this 26th.
Month? Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I need to plan out my whole weekend around that for sure.
I'm broke already. Merry Christmas.
I know, exactly. Well, that's good to know then in that case. So, so that's What Are You Playing right there. So before we move on with the rest of the show, I do have a game code here to give away. So this is a game code actually for Tiny Metal on Steam. So Tiny Metal is a turn-based strategy game of skill and tactics inspired by Japanese arcade war games of the past, like the Advance Wars series. Step into the aftermath of a kingdom reeling from an assassination and try to restore order through military might. Roll out tanks, take control of cities, launch aerial strikes, expand your squad, and struggle for territory in a stylistic tactical war game for fans young and old. So, so if you're an Advance Wars fan, you've probably heard about this game. Definitely one to pick up, and you can pick up a copy right here. Again, this is on Steam. The code is J7A96. JWZHJ 0LY6D. Again, that's Tiny Metal on Steam. Enjoy. So next up is the Stage of History, which is a celebration of retro titles that deserve a spot, for better or for worse, in the pantheons of history. So I figured I would pick like a couple of old school NES RPGs basically for your sake here, Joe.
Good, there we go.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I can now join the party a little bit. Okay.
Indeed. I try to keep our guests in mind. So to start us off, we have Faxanadu. So this is a 1989 action role-playing game by Hudson Soft. The title is a portmanteau of Famicom and Xanadu, of which it is a spin-off of. Christian symbols such as the Holy Cross and the crucifixion of Jesus were removed from the Japanese version when shipped internationally. And the game world was featured in 2 episodes of Captain N, the Game Master, starring the Elven King named Melvis, who looked and sounded like Elvis Presley. So,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Indeed. So, Joe, I figure I'll have you start us off here. Actually, have you played Faxanadu?
Oh yeah. I played it. I played it as a kid, and then as we were going through playing a lot of games in my MAME cabinet, I definitely rocked that one a little bit over the last couple of years. Just dabbled in it though. Never really got back full into it. Just analysis purposes. And it's unique. It's a the sort of side-scrolling action adventure RPG is a little bit different than a lot of the RPGs that had came out. And you didn't really see that trend. We got used to what an RPG looked like in the 16-bit era with all the Final Fantasy games and things like that.
Right, yeah.
But we didn't see a lot of games that sort of looked and played like Faxanadu did. So it's still remained unique, and I think it's totally playable. I think it's a very cool game.
Yeah, I mean, because the only other game I could really think of, I guess, in that side-scrolling RPG kind of, at least side-scrolling action RPG sort of genre would be Zelda 2, obviously.
Right.
But it's, I've actually never played Faxanadu. I've always been curious to play it, just because it does look really, really cool, and I just never really gave it the time of day, honestly.
Yeah, it's neat. There was a Battle of Olympus too that had that same sort of
that's right.
side-scrolling
Castlevania
RPG feel.
Castlevania 2 is kind of
Two,
like that.
I agree. Yep.
Yeah, just some of the elements of some RPG elements in there for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I never played it either. I just never really got around to it. And I always called it Faxanadu because anytime I say Faxanadu, I think of Olivia Newton-John. Just right in my
Xanadu.
Yeah, see, that's exactly why.
I think I used to call it as a kid Faxanandu. I think that's
right. Well, I never got pronunciation right anyway. Da-da-da. But I just I was it looked like Faxanadu. And I thought that was kind of a cool way to say it because like Martin Landau, it's perfect.
Yeah, that's
every kid's favorite actor, Martin Landau.
Well, you know what? Everybody was watching Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I was watching North by Northwest. Leave me alone. My dad introduced me to that film, and I was like, "Yeah, this is fun. Why not?"
There you go.
Although I did watch Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I'm not that bad.
Yeah. How about you there, Rob? Any experience with Faxanadu?
Yeah, I mean, there's a specific memory that stands out. There was a place called Nintendo Headquarters here in my hometown that rented games, as you did back in the day. And I remember grabbing Faxanadu, and I took it home, and I hated it. I absolutely loathed it as a child. I wasn't what I was looking for, and I rushed back to the store, and I said, I think you gave me the wrong one. They're like, no, you handed it. Like, no, you gave me the wrong one. What I wanted was Blaster Master. And thus began a lovely weekend of Blaster Master in its wake, which was great. And I just learned recently too, though, that Faxanadu is from Falcom, which is an RPG publisher developer that I'm getting into with a lot of the Japanese releases for the PS3 and PS4.
Very cool. Yeah, and it came out it's been 30 years ago now. So yeah, it's
old.
It's
classic rock RPG.
Yeah, right. The classic rock of RPGs. That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, Boston.
Those are the kind of games though I would love to see what a creative mind could do with a game set in the universe of that. The games that were way under the radar. It's very obvious to see another Zelda or Mario game, or a lot of these, even a Mega Man game. Like the games that were, but Faxanadu, some people like you guys had never played it. Yeah. What would happen if a creator with modern game sensibilities built something in that world? That it would be kind of interesting.
Yeah,
sounds like a Kickstarter project.
It does, yeah.
You got some time, right, Joe?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
I know you can juggle this one.
Just got to finish this one thing. That's
right, exactly. One of many. That's going to lead us now into the next game in the stage of history, which is Crystalis. So this is a 1990 action role-playing game by SNK. The original Japanese name translates to Godslayer, Sonata of the Faraway Sky, another hard rock kind of sounding album name right there. The game's story and some art direction appear to be influenced by the anime film Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. And 2 of the sages are named Kensu and Athena, who are directly based on characters Kenso and Athena from SNK's Psycho Soldier game, who both characters would obviously end up like being part of the King of Fighters series as well. So yeah, like, you know, some cool like little kind of callbacks to SNK's previous franchises. But so I'll go back to you there, Joe. Have you played Crystalis?
Yes, and honestly, it's a really relevant one to bring up. Out of all the games in the Nintendo catalog, the game that Mystic Searches has been compared to the most has been Crystalis.
Oh, okay.
So,
Definitely see that.
Yeah. So, I didn't play it as a kid. I've only played it since, and it was one that when people started to tell me, "Oh, did you ever play Crystalis?" I was like, I knew of it, but I never played. Then I had to play it. I was like, okay, let me check this out. So I've played that as an adult, but never played it as a kid.
Okay.
I'm wondering how that would have changed my perception of the game had I played it, you know, Christmas morning in 1991 or 2 or whenever it was.
You probably would have been like, I don't need to make Mystic Searches. This is pretty much it.
Here it is. Yeah. They
I'm
did it.
gonna re-release this like under SNK's blessing. So
Congratulations, guys! You did it.
I know, yeah, you made my game.
You saved me 20 years.
Right. Yeah. I was kind of curious, actually, Joe. Like, since there is like, you know, a lot of comparisons, I guess, like, you know, with this game to your game, like, did it have any sort of like impact, I guess, on like, you know, any development from then on, like from the first time you got to play it?
Don't think so. It's obviously that's really hard to quantify because the game is such an amalgam of other games. I'd still say that we stuck pretty close to the mechanic ideas that were in the childhood design documents, and really what that was we want to make a game that's like Zelda 2 but also like Zelda 1. So here's what it's going to be, you know, and that was sort of the core mechanics. That's how the whole 2.5D jumping mechanic in a top-down game, that's how that sort of came about. The original map was actually an upside-down and backwards version of part of the Zelda 2 map.
Oh wow!
When I look, and I didn't remember that until about a year and a half. And the new map is not that at all. It's changed a lot since then. But like, it's funny looking back and being like, oh wow, that's what we were doing. So I think that the game exists as it does, and it's because, you know, SNK they just had good taste. They had good ideas. That's all.
I would agree. I'm a huge SNK fan in general. So
yeah. I mean, I was too busy playing Mechanized Attack at the time, but this was a fun little spin-off adventure. 2 things. Number 1, I actually called it Crystalis. It looks like Crystalis. It doesn't look like Crystalis.
The pronunciation wars continue.
Crystalis.
And if you say that, you'll have people that are going to troll out on your comment thread that say that that's the way to call it, because I've been corrected both ways. So just when I started calling it Crystalis, people started saying, no, it's Crystalis. Yeah. So then when I started pronouncing it Crystalis, people said, no, it's Crystalis.
Just like Street Fighter fans like back then saying Ryu or Ryu, you know.
Or, you know, Secret of Mana, Secret of Mana, you know, we're going to be here all day talking about mispronunciations. But the second interesting thing about this is that at the time of the game's release, SNK set up a tip line. I remember getting stuck at one point in the game. So, it wasn't a 900 thing. It was like a long distance thing. So, I didn't tell my dad, and I decided to call the number. And the tip line was pretty much the most useless thing in the world. It wasn't even like, it didn't even sound like an official tip line. It was this guy, they got on the phone to be like, hey, how you doing? Enjoying Crystalis? Yeah. If you go around the back end, you can get 500 gems there, but you're probably already cool and already got that. So welcome back. And that was the tip. That was it. That was the only tip. And it was like, that was pretty goddamn useless.
It was like a 1-900 number too, like
just an answering machine.
Yeah, it was just an answering machine. Sounded like my drunken uncle. Hey, you know that if you honk on that boat horn, it makes that noise. Yeah, welcome back.
It was like a 1-900 number also, or?
No, it was like a long distance number, so it was only like $1 to call it. But I was listening to it, and I'm like, that's got to be the worst tip line ever. And then, of course, a few months later, Alfred Chicken came out, and I called it, be like, do you want a chicken? Here's how to find an extra chicken. I'd be like, I'm annoyed by this voice. So that's why I don't call tip lines anymore. Like, back then, they were trying to do the whole 900 thing or a toll-free 800 number thing, and they were always shit.
Right.
I don't get it. But, I mean, Crystalis, whatever. It was a fun adventure for the NES. If you haven't experienced it yet, play it before you play Mystic Searches. There you go.
And then call the Mystic Searches hotline.
And then we need to make a
I
Mystic
should
Searches
totally
hotline
have a hotline.
It's just going to be Joe doing this. Hey, everybody. Check out.
Hey, everybody.
Have you searched Mystic Searches?
Yeah.
They're all about the new 8-bit heroes, my nipples.
We need to make this a thing now. We definitely need to make this a thing.
Oh my god.
So this is going to lead us now into Obscura.
While we're talking about like NES games that were challenging to develop, I wanted to pick a pretty good one here. So I picked a game that was near the end of its life cycle and the only fighting game that was released for the US Nintendo system, because they had Street Fighter ports and everything in Japan, but nothing ever came out officially here. And that's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters. This game actually came out between the period of 1993 and 1994. It was also released for Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and those were two entirely different versions, just like the NES version. There are only 7 characters in the game. There's Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, Donatello, Hothead, Casey Jones, and Shredder. That's it. And each of them had only like one special move that you had to do the whole roll around fireball sort of motion on the controller to pull off.
It's kind of tough, like on the NES D-pad too, honestly.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to do it on an NES D-pad. It was way better in Super Nintendo, but it was an interesting game because like I said, it's the only fighting game that genuinely sort of Street Fighter fighting game for the NES, but it was actually fun to play. Like being able to beat up somebody in 8-bit style was kind of cool. I just wish I had more characters. There was no Krang, there was no Screw Loose, there was no April O'Neil, nothing like that, like in the other versions. But it was a lot of fun. There was a 4-player tournament mode, which players could swap off with controllers. It had the graphics were like, they had the scrolling floor, so it created like the parallax scrolling effect, which I assume probably took a while to program. And it's become a real rarity. I mean, just reflecting back here to Rob's Nintendo Quest story, I'm sure this was a bitch to find in the midst of your 30-day quest, because this is like one of the rarest cartridges to find on the NES right now.
Well, it was definitely in the top 20 for sure, and we talked about it a lot. When are we going to find it? When are we going to find it? And you'll have to watch the film to see if we found it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Indeed. You'll have to just check that out. But yeah, I mean, that was the game I thought we'd talk about here because it's like I said, it was the sort of game that the NES wasn't really made for. Obviously, the Super Nintendo was, because of stuff like Street Fighter 2 and its version of Tournament Fighters. But I found it kind of interesting. Like the developers probably had to go through a lot of hoops. Like there was even one character, Hothead. You couldn't put Hothead against Hothead in a 2-player match because the sprites were a little bit too powerful. I mean, there was a way around to do that in the versus CPU mode, but otherwise it was a slow down mess. So, I mean, I wanted to bring this up because it was a really challenging version to program, but I thought it was kind of cool. It's like
I've been conceptualizing in working on NESmaker, like how to build 2-player games are difficult enough if they're on the same screen, but like 2-player versus games, how to handle that with loading graphics and things like that. And it's a nightmare because of the graphic limitations that you have on the screen at any given time. And it goes whatever you think the problems might be, it goes way beyond them. Like you can only have 8 sprites per scan line, right? A character that's the width of Mario, who's a fairly small character compared to like a Street Fighter character, right? That's already 2. So if you have also an arm that extends or a leg that extends, at least 1 sprite, that's 3. So if you've got 2 characters on the screen, that's using 6 of your sprites. That's if you're not like having any kind of projectiles or effects or blood or sweat or pow or whatever when things are hitting, or if you don't have a weapon in your hand or anything like that. It's so hard to conceive of, and that's if you have really tiny NES-sized sprites. That's not even if you had like a Street Fighter sized sprite. If you have like a 4x4 sprite, that's it. That you can have 2 sprites on the screen, and all you're going to get after that is flicker.
Well, I know this like NES version of like Tournament Fighters, it has like this black border around it. So I imagine that's like on purpose, so as to kind of limit the amount of like pixels that are on screen at the same time.
Oh
sure. Yeah. And it's, and not only that, but you can only have 64 sprites on the screen at the same time. That's it. And if you have a 4 wide by 6 tall character, that's 24 sprites right there. You're eating up a ton just for those characters. And again, what if you want to draw sprites to like the HUD, because your color palettes are really limited for background graphics? You might want more for your sprites. It gets super crazy. Like there's probably a reason that games like that did not reverse port to the NES, because it's just, you end up with something that's so limited that you can't end up doing the things that you want to do with it and then everyone just says, screw it, I'm going doing this.
Yeah.
This.
I mean, I can't imagine that had to be a limitation with games like, say, Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, Double Dragon 2, Hyperstone Heist, stuff like that. You saw
go back and play Ninja Turtles the arcade game, and it is horrible in comparison as a port because of all the flickering and things like that. Still fun to play, but man, it is
it chugs,
yeah, it's brutal,
chugs like a college kid. Yep.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, I bring up Tournament Fighters because I thought, like I said, it was a great example of people pushing the NES to their limits and everything like that. So yeah, that's my my Obscura this week. If you can find a copy on NES without paying $500, go for it.
Yeah, good luck for sure.
Good.
So that's going to lead us now into our main topic here, which is going to be all about the new 8-Bit Heroes film that's that you're releasing there, Joe, or actually it has released. Actually, that's now on Amazon, and also NESmaker. So I guess since you've already kind of talked a little bit about the new 8-Bit Heroes film, I guess can you talk a little bit more, I guess, on in regards to what kind of sparked the idea for the new 8-Bit Heroes?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to do this as quick as I can. I'm kind of rehearsed at this point.
Sure.
Okay. I moved from Baltimore to Florida in 2011 or something. And I was new down here. I didn't want a lapse on my film portfolio. And I didn't know any filmmakers down here, so I didn't know what I was going to film. And I started playing with this old IP that I had with a buddy of mine about a film about the influence of the Legend of Zelda series on modern creatives, how it shaped the cultural landscape in the U.S. and things like that, how we all had these shared experiences growing up. And we started delving into that, and it was a great one I could film on my own, and I started to try and put together interest in that, and I raised some money, and I launched a crowdfunding campaign, and I shot a bunch of footage, and it failed. It just went nowhere. We couldn't get the funds. It was kind of disappointing, but over the course of filming that, when I went home to get all my NES stuff out of storage, I found these old design documents, quote unquote, that I had done with another neighborhood kid when I was 8 years old back in 1988 for a NES game we wanted to make. And we had taken those ideas and put them in a box and sent them to Nintendo at the time with a note that said something like, "Hey, please send us the stuff to make our game like a blank cartridge and stuff. Joe, Matt, age 8," or something like that, handwritten in pencil. And they sent it back a couple months later. I don't know what we were expecting, but sent them back, take unsolicited game ideas, and those ideas ended up in my shed. Well, when the Zelda documentary sort of tanked, it didn't really go anywhere. I'd had those design documents. I said, this is interesting. I wonder what would happen. I wonder if anyone would be interested in me trying to make this, and not just as like a iPhone game, but actually as an NES game, like as if they had said, "Okay, kid, let's make it, let's do it."
Right.
Could I bring this to life in this revisionist
alternate
history
timeline in this case?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And what would anyone care? Would this be interesting? And I kind of put out a little video about finding the design documents, and I had a couple of friends that I'd met through pushing the Zelda documentary run with the video just to see if it got any interest. And overnight, it got 20,000 views. And I was like, "Huh. All right, that's the next video I'm doing. That's the next film I'm doing, I guess." And so it like I said, it kind of twisted and turned in ways I didn't expect. But yeah, when I was 8 years old, I was the Nintendo kid, and I was the kid that people came to with questions about games, and I had all the Nintendo Power magazines and big library of games, and eventually you want to make your own. And so many people have that same story. Like so many people that I know and that we've met have the same story. They've always wanted to create their own NES games specifically, and they end up like sort of shrugging it off and learning Game Maker, RPG Maker, or Unity, and building games for various platforms, but it never scratches the itch. They always want to actually have that physical cartridge that works on real hardware. So yeah, that's sort of how the film came about. That's sort of the background of it, I guess.
Yeah, because I remember first hearing about the Kickstarter project, and I remember kind of first hearing about it as this being like a brand new NES game. And I think we covered this actually back in our Retro Magazine days there, Robert.
Yeah.
And it was just really cool, to kind of hear about it, but also the fact that you were actually filming the whole experience as a documentary. So you were essentially taking on two big projects at the same time as one Kickstarter project, more or less. And it just blew my mind because it's that is a lot of work. Not only just with making your own game, but also making a movie all at the same time, and it's all congruent with each other. Was really cool to kind of see. So and obviously, like as you were mentioning before too, like with like the new 8-bit heroes being certainly being like a story that can resonate with people, even if they don't, if they're not into video games, like, just if you're kind of like a creative in any sort of sense. So I guess I'm kind of curious, like with, like what kind of like, I guess more of the human aspects of the film, do you hope like people like really, really kind of get out of this?
It's not necessarily about what I hope they get out of it. It's what people seem to be saying that they are getting out of it, which is what I'm finding fascinating. It's weird sort of being the filmmaker and also the subject and trying to walk that fine line and, basically having to put it in other people's hands and say, hey, help me craft this, because how do you make yourself a character in your own film? It's tough. Like that's, it's vain and arrogant and self-serving and then if you try to distance yourself from that, it becomes completely wholly unbelievable in the other way. You become pathetic and not uninteresting and an unlovable character. So that's been a challenge. And what do I want? What do I think people will get out of it? Or what do I hope people take away from it? There's as a creative person, unless you've made it, quote unquote, you often have the feeling that of futility, that like whatever you're working on, it hasn't been worth it. It's been sort of gratuitous to your life, and you would have been better spent doing anything than the thing that you tried to do that you cared passionately about. And that's a very powerful sort of emotion. And if anything, I hope people can take away the unseen value of those things and how those things, even if they weren't successful in the traditional sense of what you always thought of as success, they still really molded and shaped you and other people around you in ways that you sort of didn't expect or never saw.
Yeah, and like it's I think that is like that's actually like a really good point, actually, because like that is something that I feel like anyone who creates anything, whether you're making like YouTube videos or making music or making documentaries or or making a game in this case, like that can really just kind of like hit home for like a lot of people. I know that whole idea kind of like hits home for me ever since it's been 6 years ago now. I'd say like since I kind of like been first trying to quote unquote make it more or less within like the gaming industry in some sort of fashion, and not to make it around me, but I'll just kind of like quickly kind of spiel out with doing like my own blog and kind of like having that resonate into like community blogs and more popular websites, doing like the whole YouTube thing for a bit, doing like Retro Magazine with you there, Robert, and doing now doing like this podcast and everything too, and like just kind of like you want to try to see like what you kind of throw out there, what kind of sticks, and like the passionate side in your brain is like saying that like, oh, like this could potentially turn into something and you're doing it because you enjoy doing it. And then there's always going to be that kind of like, the dark side of their brain, more or less. That's like kind of always kind of like doubting you in that sense. So I imagine that yep. That's more or less the case, like at least the narrative in this documentary.
Yeah, absolutely. And learning how to embrace that as a powerful impetus for creation was a big part of this too.
Yeah, for sure. And I imagine that also like being friends with Rob here as well, who's also like a documentarian like himself. Like have you guys kind of like I guess like kind of like compared notes or like anything to kind of like learn from each other at all like during like this process?
He's been a good sounding board when I needed somebody to bitch to, because he understands all the things that I'm going through. So that has helped immensely.
And he's been more of a help to you than to me. So.
It's actually really cool too, because when I first talked to Joe, it was when the Zelda doc that he was doing was up on Kickstarter. So it was like kind of well before a lot of this stuff was going, and I reached out because I was trying to get connections for the NES Club, which turned into Nintendo Quest at that point. So we started on some very similar and parallel paths. And, once I heard what Joe was trying to do with the new 8-bit heroes, it was like, this is exactly the kind of spiritual sequel that makes sense for Nintendo Quest, which, looks at that lust and desire to keep that fan culture alive and to take that childlike passion forward as an adult. And here's Joe saying, let's take the passion to create things that we had when we were children and to, contribute to that culture. So it was really cool that we were able to kind of meet and go on a somewhat similar journey in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. And like it kind of like makes sense too. Like it's funny because like I knew you guys separately and not even realizing that there was any sort of connection between you two, like whatsoever. But I was like thinking in my mind, when I first got to know both of you, that like, oh, these two should totally work on something together. Like it just makes all the sense in the world. I don't know why. Like I didn't think of it earlier. You know? Yeah. And like I'm glad to see that that you guys are like that you do like collaborate and like are like kind of like creative friends in that sense too, which is great to see.
I think the only reason we're not collaborating more on things is because the physical distance between us and that kind of thing. We had fun when we filmed together in Vegas. That was a blast.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, well, up to a point where he starts like hey, I need some food. Have a Rolling Rock.
Right. Yeah. Also, like having families too, I imagine would make that like a little difficult in that sense. But like,
not really though. I mean, Joe's got a 1-year-old, and I've got one that's due in 4 weeks, and I've got a 3-year-old son. So again, the parallel journey continues.
There you go.
Exactly. There you go. I'm sure there's always a way to figure that out. Now, I got a question here. Joe, at what point did you decide over the course of your journey that when you came to developing Mystic Searches, it was about using older development tools? I mean, what were you saying in your mind when you said, you know what, I don't want to use the easy way out. I want to do this the hard way?
Well, I mean, there really is no easy way to develop an NES game.
Well, obviously, I'm just saying.
But you
tried, instead of climbing this smaller mountain, you climbed Mount Gibraltar.
No, I've been a game programmer. I've developed games before. I've worked in Unity. I worked in, I taught game design in high school for 6 years. I'm not a newcomer to the game development in general. Right. So it wasn't like I had to learn the logic of game programming from the ground up or anything, but I almost wish that I had been, because I'd been so used to the way things are done in modern engines that I just came in with a lot of misconceptions and a lot of shortcuts I would have taken, if I was making it in a modern environment, and things you take for granted when you build in modern. I'll give you an example. Making music, you're not just making the song, you're not just making an MP3 anymore. You are literally like building the instrument and then creating the DAW that you're recording it to, and then building the speakers, and then you don't just get to make the music. You have to do all of that in order to actually make the music. What was it that my tool developer said? Josh said, perfect. This was his best quote. He says, "You ever play with Legos?" Like, yeah. He's like, okay, building for the NES is, playing with Legos is fun. Making games is fun. But building for the NES isn't just playing with Legos, because the Legos don't exist. You actually have to make the Legos in the factory. Not only do you have to make the Legos in the factory, you have to build the machinery for the factory that can make the Legos just so you can play with the Legos. That's what developing for the NES is like. So what made us do that? We're masochists, I guess. We like the pain.
It makes sense. So I'll and also like there is like something else actually that that you and Rob are actually working on together, at least in some fashion, which is the NESmaker. So can you explain a little bit about what this tool is all about?
Whoa! I'm not working on that with Joe. I'm certainly a part of it. All the credit goes to him and his team, but I am kindly tethered to it. Somewhat thanks to his, I don't know how this came up or when it came up for Joe for this idea, but the second he announced it made sense for this to be the way that we go forth with the collaboration that we do get to do from a remote distance. So Joe, I'm gonna let you take it over. I just needed to sweep that clear because this is very much your baby, but I'm a huge champion in what you're trying to do.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So. Well, what happened with NESmaker? It's really kind of dumb. We had to make a bunch of tools for ourselves to mine for that, and everybody does. Everybody who's building homebrew games, unless they are stupid simple, and I mean like take the simplest game that was actually commercially released for the NES and make it way simpler. Unless you're doing that, you're building basically a thing moving on the screen. You're building some kind of tools to mine for assembly data. Like you're building your engine, but then to get like screen data, you're making some kind of editor. To get graphics or animation data, you're building some kind of editor, all these things. So we started building these editors for Mystic Searches because our engine is fairly complex as far as NES games go. And we needed to do that. So we built, a tool that helped us design screens and could align collision data rather than writing these long tables of byte values, hex values. And we made a tool that you could see what you were doing, and you hit the button and it exported all the hex values. The NES read it the same way as if but we could see it and test it, without having to get back into the actual code. And then we did the same thing, like for the anime. I mean, working on animations with just using hex values was absurd. If you wanted to make changes, it would take so long. So we made an animation tool. You could load in the sprites and you could change the graphics and you could make a little animation, and then you hit the button, and when it exports in the data that the NES can read, and you don't ever have to get into the code. And we kept doing this with little parts of the game that we needed to mine for data for. And before we knew it, we're like, hey guys, we have NESmaker. We have a tool that you don't have to do any coding for and could make a NES game. This is incredible. So I gave it to our artist who knows no coding, and I said, here, I know you're a sci-fi guy, make a sci-fi game. And so he just tweaked the graphics and he started working on the engine and he made screens and stuff, and he made a sci-fi game without ever touching the code. And we're like, this is incredible. We could, people might want this in the community. So we started putting some feelers out, who would be interested in this, who would want to see a NESmaker. We know some people are going to be really pretentious about it and say, I put all the work into making my game and you guys are just making, shut up. Different tools for different people. And there was such a strong response that we're like, okay, let's see what we can do. And I kind of hired on our tool developer for a while out of a little bit out of my own pocket, a little bit out of the project budget, and a little bit out of the promissory. We're going to do a crowdfunding campaign to really do this right, but we need to get to this point. And he's a freelance programmer. This is how he keeps his power on and feeds his kids. He can't work for free. So anyway, we started working with the tool to become more diverse, to see what we could do with it. So it's not just making derivative Mystic Searches style games, but can really do a lot. The engine would be really thick. And in order to do that, we have to make some creative decisions for the end user, like what mapper it uses, we're sort of setting, and how it handles certain things like animations and music and things. We're creating those engines so a user doesn't have to code it. But aside from that, the user can pretty much create whatever they can sort of envision in their brain, and the tool sets your limits for you. So you're not trying to think about, how many graphics can I have on the screen and what colors can I... No, you're creating it all in the tool and getting instant visual feedback for what you're creating.
I mean, I can imagine with the homebrew community, they would be all over this type of tool though.
A lot, and fortunately, we've demonstrated a lot of good faith with the homebrew community with putting out a documentary showing what they go through and definitely pimping them and driving what they do and showing how the difficulty of what they do. But there are definitely, I'm saying it now and you can chime in when you see it, there are going to be some people who are very upset with us for making a tool like this. They consider themselves the guardians of the secret of the NES. Oh no, I worked for years to master my craft and you're going to come along and make this tool that can... And that just drives me crazy, because I mean, the goal at the end of this should be more cool NES games. That should be it. That should be everybody's goal in this community. And this is just going to be a jumping off point for a lot of people. A lot of people are going to get to a point with this tool. They're going to say, well, I wish it could do this. And then they're going to start learning in the assembly. But instead of having to learn everything from scratch, they're going to be able to sort of wade into it and sort of see how it works with the tools and get that gratification, instead of literally taking a year of their life just to learn how assembly works.
You know what that kind of reminds me of? There was a show is How Do Magicians Secrets work and all that stuff, and they showed off how some of the tricks work, and really got pissed off at the magicians. But a lot of people actually learned from that and became magicians themselves. So sometimes you need to have a learning tool out there. I mean, granted, it is kind of a spoiler thing if you're looking to take the hard route, but it does kind of aid in regards to getting off the ground and seeing what you could do with NES development.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and and I'll say anything that can make game development more accessible, considering how insanely difficult it is to go from conception to finished product in terms of a game, for any game, not only with the type of game that you're making, being an NES, literally an NES game, but even like with like like more modern games, obviously, with like the indie community and everything, with like the homebrew like community, I've been seeing some like really really amazing projects, and like it is really cool like with what they've been making. But I would imagine that there should be more like unanimous like I guess like support for like a tool like this that can, as you said, like bring in more more varied projects from more people, basically.
Right? And to be clear, I haven't gotten any of that flack yet. I'm just anticipating it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like no one has said anything. There are a few homebrewers and post-market developers that are super excited about the tool or genuinely curious about the tool and have asked all kinds of questions. But I'm anticipating some people are going to have a little bit of a chip about well, if I was going to do it, I would have done it this way, that kind of thing too, And
but I mean, like considering like how robust that you're looking to kind of make this tool as well, I mean, like I imagine that it should be able to make all sorts of different types of games. So I'm kind of curious, actually, like aside from Mystic Searches, like what are some of the, I guess, more robust types of games that this tool could make?
In the latest YouTube video where I'm sort of showing the tool, because we're getting a lot of people like, well, yeah, no, that can't work, you need to do coding to make NES games. I'm like, well, here's a video, I'm going to show you how I do it. And in the latest one, I actually show a mock-up of what a platformer might look like, a mock-up of what a fighting game would look like, actually running in an emulator, like actually creating the physics for a platform game, and without ever touching the code, just with what's already there in the engine. And our goal is, with the crowdfunding campaign, why we want to do the crowdfunding campaign is we want to extend the capabilities of what the tool can do. And we've come up with a pretty, I'm crediting my tool developer more than myself, but pretty ingenious idea with these modules where we're building it so it works. Do you guys ever play around with MAME cabinets?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you kind of know how a MAME cabinet works, right? Like you have a front end, and that's activating emulators, and those emulators are running ROMs, right? We're trying to sort of create NESmaker into something that works kind of like the front end, where we have different modules which work kind of like the different emulators, and then underneath that you have the actual game you're working on, which are kind of like the ROM files. So if you were to build your own game engine, you could use it as a module and implant it into NESmaker, and then use what NESmaker does, but it would compile it through your module. So the end result would do what you're telling those values that NESmaker gives it to do. And that's how we're trying to make it like infinitely expandable. So that's, we want to build a platform module that has all the common things that a platform game might have, and an RPG module that has all the common things that an RPG might have. And then, you can sort of pick and choose what makes your game unique and things like that. And the goal, just make it as simple as possible to actually start cranking stuff out and, allow the people that are creative, the writers, the artists, whatever, to be able to tell their stories on the NES too. Because let's face it, they can make games. Like somebody who's just an artist can learn Unity and never have to learn JavaScript. They can do that and make their game. So why would they try and spend years learning assembly language if they're not a coding person? They never would. They'll just jump ship and go make it on something else. So this is a way for NES development to sort of keep up with these other ways of developing games in, contemporary game development.
Very cool, yeah. And like, so it sounds like the same tool could be made to make, like a robust RPG like Mystic Searches, or like a platformer, or I guess maybe even like a puzzle game, for example. Yep. So like, it is really exciting to see like what could come from this, for sure.
And we can't wait to see how people break it. Like I'm more excited to see how people break it and use it in ways that I never even thought of.
Oh yeah, go outside the box. That would totally work for it.
Yeah.
I did want to ask about the new 8-Hit Heroes, because I'm taking a look at the people that are actually involved with it. It features a number of different people. We got Adam Goldberg, who's creator of ABC's The Goldbergs. You got Howard Phillips, creator of Nintendo Power Magazine, and you even have the angry video game nerd, James Rolfe. What part do they play in the documentary? Are they just people that take part in seeing the work that you do on the game?
You want me to give that many spoilers?
Okay,
there's
fine.
Just tell us all about the movie. Yeah,
yeah, I'll tell you the whole story.
I started as a young man.
Yeah, right. But no,
how you got
they all have pretty relevant moments in the film. I talked to I just am fortunate enough to know a lot of people in the community, and however you know them in the community is sort of how they show up in interesting ways in the film. So Angry Video Game Nerd we have a nice talk about, the fact that there was a lot of really bad NES games. There was some great ones, but out of the 800 game catalog, there was like 600 bad games. Like it was, there was some really bad games. How do we prevent our game from sucking? Was a question that was perfect for the angry video game nerd. And so we have a nice little moment where we talk to him about that. And there's a nice sequence with Adam Goldberg. He was a huge supporter of the project from early on because when he was a kid, he used to make games too. So part of his whole nerd culture that led to him being a successful creative in Hollywood is him developing games as a kid. So we had that cool sort of attachment with him. We ended up being able to have so many interesting people involved in the project that we never saw coming, and not all of them game related either. Like David Sardi is a composer, producer. He worked on like Red Hot Chili Peppers albums, Rage Against the Machine, System of a Down, Nine Inch Nails. Like, his discography is ridiculous. And we were fortunate enough to have him in the film and even do a session in his studio, record a tune in his studio. Piers Anthony, who 21-time best-selling fantasy novelist, did the Xanth series and Incarnations of Immortality. Like, he got involved, and him and our narrative developer were talking about, how to construct a fantasy narrative within constraints and things like that. So yeah, it was super interesting. And I look back every day and I look at all the projects that I've done in my last 30 years of creating things, and I point to this and I say, and this was the one out of all the things I've done, this was the one that got that level of attention. I don't think that I think I avoided most spoilers.
Yeah,
you did okay.
Yeah, for sure. And Rob, I was actually kind of curious, I guess, like with like what your involvement is, I guess, like with like NESmaker specifically. Actually, like is there something that you're looking to kind of like create, like using those tools, or is that something that you can't get into? Or I was kind of curious your story with that.
Yeah, we could talk about that a little bit. Rob, do you want to talk about how it started talking about NES game, and I'll.
Yeah, sure. I'll start it off. Well, I mean, a few years ago now, we did a second crowdfunding campaign for distribution to get Nintendo Quest basically on discs for people to enjoy, because so many people had discovered that film by the time that we did our first campaign that was successful and filmed it, and the press was getting out there. So we wanted to give people another chance to own it on physical media. And then we hit our goal within something like 3 hours or something like that. So we started going into stretch goal mode. And one of the things was, what if we made an NES game based on Nintendo Quest, in which you go around like Jay trying to collect, 600 NES games, 678 NES games, and you got to go town to town in an RPG like fashion, where you got to fight people and collect games and different rarities and different games. Yeah, different games you can equip in different styles and stuff like that. And Joe had been working on Mystic Searches and his project, again, the overlap there. And I said, hey, what would this cost to do? And can we make this happen? Are you interested? And he said, yeah, man, I'm interested. Sure, why not? Throw it on the plate. And then
I said, don't worry, Mystic Searches is almost done.
Yeah, we're almost done. It'll be about 6 months for us, and then we can get going on your game.
That was 3 years ago.
later.
Again, with those quotation marks, almost.
Right. It's like a SpongeBob episode 3 years later.
And so what ended up happening is I started to talk Rob into, hey, if we make your game more of an adventure game, we could probably crank it out quicker because we can use Mystic Search's engine and just do some tweaks. And how does that sound? And he's like, really want an RPG? Okay, sure, whatever you think is best. I said, okay. And then, recently when we've really been diving into NESmaker, I'm like, hey, why don't we sort of use the RPG module and let's use that as a basic create your game as an RPG. So forget what I just said, okay, let's do that. So yeah, it's going to be a good test of how our tool can sort of do these different modules. And when I'm looking at RPGs and I'm thinking about what we can do and how we can twist the tool to do RPGs, that's sort of what I have in mind and what I'm working on. So even though it seems like I'm not working on their game, quote unquote, specifically, I am working on the game. I'm not filling out the assets for the game, but the core engine underneath I'm working on their game and probably a lot of other people's games too.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time to thank everybody for their patience who is waiting for the Nintendo Quest game coming out. Clearly, this discussion really illustrates how much Joe has got going on, and to get to this point where it is something that is actually in a modular capacity, it is pretty exciting. So not only will you eventually get your Nintendo Quest based NES game, but you're also going to have access to a tool set out there. If you want to go make your own games and you want to make your own RPGs, you're going to be able to, hit Joe up and say, Joe, I like what you did here with this RPG thing. I want to do my own thing. And he can point you to, how you get the software to kind of do that. But this game is basically creating that module or the need for that module, because Joe already said he'd make this game for me, so he can't back away now.
Yeah,
that's very true.
It's honestly like a very excellent like collaboration. That sense of kind of like realizing your own dream for your own game there, Rob. But utilizing like the tool set which Joe is making, and it's really really cool stuff. Like to kind of see what you both are making, honestly. With everything, and I honestly I am really really curious to see what can be made with the NESmaker. I've certainly done like some research into it, like here and there, just kind of get like a sense as far as like how it's being made, and like kind of hearing like like what you've been saying about Joe, with like with like the different possibilities, the different types of games, and like with like the modules in place and everything. As far as like what's possible basically with the tool, it definitely leaves like a lot of ideas out there that could become reality, just like how you made your own dream a reality with Mystic Searches. So right. I only wish you like the best of luck, honestly, like with the release of that, with the release of the film, with the release of like the game and everything, obviously, which honestly, like if you want to look up more information for all three things, as well as like everything about the new 8-bit heroes, there is the new 8bitheroes.com, which we will have in the show notes below.
Mm-hmm.
And that site's about to get a pretty major facelift with a lot of new info too. So next couple of weeks, the crowdfunding for NESmaker starts in just a couple days now, 8 days. So at PAX South, at PAX South, we'll be launching the crowdfunding campaign to extend NESmaker's capabilities, like I was just talking about a minute ago. And so, yeah, we could definitely use the help letting people know it's a thing.
Keep us informed, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. So be sure to check out the new 8bitheroes.com again for all information on NESmaker, on Mystic Searches, as well as the film, the new 8-bit Heroes. So really, really cool stuff there. And and again, the best of luck to you there, Joe. With that, as well as best of luck to you there, Rob, with with making the Nintendo Quest game too. So.
Yeah, looking forward to it, and I wish Joe success on his Kickstarter endeavor. I'll be sharing the link, I'm sure, and taking a look at it myself.
For sure.
You know what? We could probably use like an ARG podcast game where it's me and David taking on platforming challenges.
Believe it or not, a lot of people are sort of thinking about it in the same sense, especially people who are in the retro game community. And I'm really hoping that they put that idea in their supporters' minds. Like, hey, if this tool comes to be, I mean, honestly, that's the funny part about it. I keep saying it as if this tool is some hypothetical. You could make a game with it right now. As it stands right now, watch the videos. You could demo it. You can make a action adventure game with it right now, fairly easily, without any modifications or any improvements to it as it is. So now it's just a matter of making it better. But I'm hoping a lot of people run with that idea. Like that's the goal. That's the point.
Yeah.
I want to see people like you guys. Hey, we want to make our game. That would be awesome. And like the light bulb that just went off in your head and the gears that just started turning. Yeah, that's who we're making this for. That you're exactly who we're making this tool for.
Yeah.
So.
Just when you do this, as Joe continues to tell me, take all your ideas and eliminate 90% of them, and then really focus hard on that remaining 10% and get rid of 90% of that left.
Right.
And then that's the game.
And then you'll be close.
Yeah. It's like draft after draft after draft for sure. Yeah. Of like just the original concept and developing into a more refined idea into the actual product.
What I'm looking forward to is the people who complain. They'll say something like, "Well, I want my game to do this, and I'll say, "Yeah, but the engine doesn't really do that." Like, well, that's stupid because this game did that. Like, yeah,
this is NESmaker, man. It should be able to do anything that the NES did.
Exactly. And how many conversations am I going to have where I'm explaining?
Just send them to the tip line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The new 8-bit Heroes
my
tip
God.
line.
Yeah, there you go. Be like, hey, what's
Send them to the tip line, which
Oh my
just
God.
randomly pulls a message that you've pre-recorded from 50 different responses, and that's that.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's an amazing idea. I wonder, it can't be that much to set up like a
That's a good
voicemail.
stretch goal.
Like it can't be that much to set up a voicemail 800 number tip line.
No, you can just do it through Skype, right? You can set up a message on Skype to auto call or auto answer.
and then make it interesting and make it all just Max Headroom clips.
Nice.
What's going? That sort of thing. Just
Just
Or
call
if
it
they
1-900
email you for tips, then it just spits back a random YouTube link.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Exactly, yeah. Just call 1-900-HIT-8-BIT. So.
they're actually going to trademark that now. Watch.
Right, exactly.
Really-
Exactly, yeah.
And done.
And done, exactly. and that'll be done for the main topic right there, too. So, again, the new 8bitheroes.com for all the information on everything that we talked about there. So, really, really cool stuff. And, Robert, I believe you have a game code here to give away.
I do. I have a game code giveaway called for Telltale Games Poker Night 2. The chips are down and the ante is up, and the sentence already bursting with poker cliches. Take the 5th seat in Poker Night 2 at a table featuring Claptrap from Borderlands 2, Brock Sampson from the Venture Brothers, Ash from Army of Darkness, and Sam from Sam & Max series, as well as special appearance by GLaDOS from Portal. And here's the code for the Steam version of that game. It's 96NIM02A6T 4NC6Y. That is for Poker Night 2 on Steam. Enjoy. Not made with NESmaker.
Right, exactly. I have to
But
love that
imagine
game,
if
by the
it
way.
was.
Exactly.
I know that. But, hey, challenge accepted.
You
There
soon
go,
can create the poker module on NESmaker when it launches on Kickstarter in just 8 days.
guys.
Right.
There you go.
That or if you make an 8-bit version of like an Army of Darkness game, actually that'd be pretty sweet to see.
Like a Castlevania style game. Ooh, I got to call
Yeah.
Star.
Yeah.
Do you know what? And this is really depressing. Do you know what game, or do you know what intellectual property our engine is perfect for?
Which
That
one?
would make an awesome game. Stranger Things.
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, obviously. Like
You-
there have been like some like 8-bit recreations of the show in some fashion floating
I have
around
tried
online.
to reach out to the Duffer Brothers and said, "Dude, we can do this. I just need you to approve it. We'll talk. Let's talk."
Yeah.
And I have not heard. I'm very disappointed.
Hopefully
you did that.
Got to get Adam Goldberg to call on your behalf.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, maybe. Yeah,
Never
there you
got-
go.
You know what? He could probably do a Goldberg's video game.
You know, I've got to reach out to him because he's a backer of box art as well, and we got to get his cover art done for his reward too. So the trifecta parallel quest continues.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very, very cool. So that's going to lead us now to the part of the show now called Random Selects. So this is a yes or no 15-question game to guess which video game character I am this week. So this is like my turn basically, and so I figure like since there's going to be 3 of you guys, instead of having you guys, all go like head to head, we'll just kind of have you act as like a team basically to guess which video game character I am. So basically after the 5th round of questions, it'll be I'll give like the first hint. After the 10th round of questions, I'll give the second hint. And if after 15 questions you still don't get it, then it's game over. So
Is it Mario?
no, it's not Mario. Game over.
Are you human?
Okay. I guess we're gonna jump right into it. So,
Yeah, sure, why not?
No, I wasn't asking about your game character. I just didn't know if you were human.
if I'm you, well, that's
I'm
up
going
for
to answer
debate,
that right
sir.
now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you want that to be the first question, I could possibly answer it. It's hard to say actually whether this person is human. Let me actually check something real quick, just so I can more definitively answer you here.
I'm not supposed to stump you. You're supposed to stump us.
I know
That's-
exactly. Yeah,
Knowing
that's
if
the
your
hard part.
character is human is a pretty basic thing to start with.
Yeah, it's a bit on the edge. honestly,
Animal?
with this character.
Mineral?
Okay, so I am going to say tentatively, yes, I am human.
Okay.
Are you the unidentified wanderer from Faxanadu?
No, really.
I was about to say 'cause it
really
doesn't
trying to throw those
define-
home run hits.
It
there.
says unidentified wanderer. So I'm assuming this is where you had difficulty.
Right. So that's and also keep in mind too, you are acting as a team in this particular version of Random Select. So that's 2 questions right there. So try not to go for the home run hits. Just an FYI. So,
No fun, man.
yeah, it'll help us guy get through it quicker too. But yeah. So yeah, like anyone who wants to jump in with a question is fine.
Go ahead, Joe. You had one.
No, I go ahead. I had mine.
Did you make your appearance before 2002?
Yes.
Did you make your appearance in the NES era?
Yes.
Do you carry a sword?
I do not carry a sword. So that is 5 right there. So the first hint is don't talk about my gut. It's a sore spot.
Do you have a bandage over your belly button?
I do.
Are you King Hippo?
Yes. Very good. Very good.
Excellent.
King Hippo for Punch Out. So yeah, that was the first hint, but the second hint I had also.
I don't know if he's human.
Yeah,
This is hilarious.
It's a little on edge. Like, and you can imagine too. Like, I don't know if he's actually human. Like, but like from what I.
Well, did you think he was a hippo?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I'm not sure if he was like supposed to be like a hippo person, or if he is actually supposed to be a human who just happens to look like a hippo. So from what I gather, he is just a person who happens to have very hippo-like features, basically.
So he's a hippin.
A hip, yeah, exactly. But like the second hint I had here, also, if you made it to the 10th round, was I had a brief stint working for a sassy boss who lived in a jar. So,
You should have just said that he was a king. That
or
should have been
king,
the first
yeah.
hint.
You should hang on a second. Got to adjust my crown.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So yeah, so good job, guys, for getting King Hippo there in random selects. So they nailed it there. And yeah, that's pretty much ARGcast episode 91. Pretty much in the books. Is there anything you guys want to throw out there before we close up shop?
I'll let these guys go first.
I think I've talked way too much in this podcast, so I'm going to shut up for the rest of it and let you guys chat.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Joe.
I think you should visit robmccallumfilms.com and check out Nintendo Quest and all the other cool things that I've got going on with my different films going on there, which also make mentions of NESmaker and Mystic Searches, I'm sure, as well as new 8-Bit Heroes. There's links to that in our recommended reading section, so check that out. And you better put your fistful of dollars down on the Kickstarter and help make some NES games in 8 days or so.
Absolutely. And I should mention, too, that you are making a He-Man documentary, which I am super excited for. Which can you talk like a little bit about that?
I can talk a little bit about it. It's sold on some different windows and platforms. It will be out later this year. We're trying to figure out if we can make the other options available that work in tandem with the current deal that we have, or if it's better for us to wait for the deal that we have to expire before we exploit the other options. But the deal is done. It is 90 minutes or 100 minutes or so, and it covers some of the same beats of the Toys That Made Us episode that chronicles the He-Man toys, but of course we cover the cartoon and the film in much greater depth. And unlike that episode, which really kind of pokes fun at the creators, we take a little bit more of the high road and let them kind of, I don't know, really paint the picture of what it was like to work in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and so on, creating a $1 billion action figure line, and it's quite interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, for sure. And like I know you came across like a lot of like really cool just He-Man merchandise and everything like during like your travels for the film and everything, which is really cool. And also meeting up with like a lot of people obviously like involved with like the the He-Man franchise and everything too. Mm-hmm. So me being like a huge He-Man fan along with you too, like I'm just like super excited for the film. So I'm really
And I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to box art, and not just because I'm in it. I'm looking forward to
both in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're both.
No wonder I'm a guest on here.
Yeah,
that's why I'm here tonight.
Come on the show. It's all good, unless we're on the editing room floor, in which case get out of here.
I think I'm contractually obliged to have you guys both on it. I think you guys picked a perk or something on that. Curse that decision I made.
Yeah, it only cost a few rolling rocks, so I think we're good. But I wanted to just mention a couple of things real quick that I'm doing over comicbook.com/gaming. I actually posted a couple of great stories today. The first one talking about new Xbox games for 2018. There is a possibility Microsoft could be bringing back Perfect Dark, but this time as a third-person action game. I'm not sure how fans are going to feel about that. I know Rare is wrapping up work on Sea of Thieves, so that would possibly be their next project. It'll be interesting to see what comes of that. And the second thing I want to give a shout out to is this project that's in the works called Arcade Spirits. It's a visual novel that's sort of like a combination romance, combination arcade management. So clearly a fantasy, But regardless, it's really cool. It's a project being put together by the team at Fiction Factory Games, written by Stefan Gagni and my good friend Ann Schumann. So if you want to learn more about that, head over to comicbook.com/gaming and look up Arcade Spirits. You'll be able to read more about this intriguing tale of arcade love. And again, the fantasy.
Is it like a pirate tale? Because you went like full on like Tim Curry Muppet Treasure Island there at the end. Yar, look it up and you'll not regret it, you landlubber.
First Launchpad and now Pirates. You and hooking me up with voices. I don't get it.
You better start believing in ghost stories, Miss Turner. You're in one.
We gotta make a Launchpad McQuack game now, like you using an NESmaker.
Hey, you know what? I've always wanted my own adventure, Mr. McD.
Yeah. Like Launchpad McQuack versus like a bunch of pirates. I think we got like a pretty good
Have you seen
there.
the DuckTales series? He's just gonna crash.
That's where the story begins. He crashes and he's got to get to Mr. McDuck and he's got to go through the pirates.
Yeah, Crash lands on a pirate island and he has to get himself out of there. So.
Hey, where the hell did all these pirates coming from, Mr. McD?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Exactly. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So if you want to find like ARGcast on Twitter, we are at ARGpodcast. Same thing for Facebook. We're at facebook.com/ARGpodcast. And if you want to find me on Twitter, it's at The Guilty Man.
You can follow me on Twitter. It's at twitter.com/thedcd. And you can find my work at comicbook.com/gaming, as if the link I said 3 times wasn't enough. There you go.
Exactly. Yeah. And Rob and Joe, like, I don't know if you care to share like your social media, like Twitter handles or anything like that.
Sure. You can follow me on Twitter at RobMixzob.
Twitter at New 8-Bit Heroes. There's no the in the Twitter handle. It's just at New 8-Bit Heroes. And Facebook.com/the New 8-Bit Heroes. That one does have the. It was too long for Twitter. They didn't want the.
Yeah.
Too long of a handle.
A little bit too long, but apparently they can't spare for the extra 140 characters like for your tweets. So
Yes.
In that case. And yeah, if you want to send us like any like emails at all, you can email us at argcast@retrozap.com if you have any like questions, any like retro games you want us to cover, or anything at all, really. And you could also check out retrozap.com for all sorts of other amazing podcasts, especially the Star Wars variety. There is Brews and Blasters, Kanata's Castle. There's Skywalking Through Neverland, Starship Sabers and Scoundrels. There's also Betway Banthas, which is really cool because it combines both politics and Star Wars. So if you're of both minds, it's definitely the podcast for you.
I bet they only talk about the prequel trilogy.
Well, you might be surprised with that one. There's also the Animaniacast. So if you're a big Animaniacs fan, that's definitely the podcast for you. And it's also Rob Paulson approved. There's also the Deucecast movie show. So just like the title suggests, it is a movie podcast, and those guys have been doing it for over 300 episodes now, so they definitely know what they're talking about over there. There's also a couple of podcasts which recently joined the RetroZap family. Actually, that's based on The Flash, which is called Scarlet Velocity, and also the Green Arrow, which is called Green Justice. So a couple of like really cool superhero podcasts to check out there. And there's also the Techno Retro Dads. So if you're a fan of old school stuff, and of course you are because you listen to the ARGcast, you love the Techno Retro Dads because they cover stuff in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Not only just video games, but also toys, commercials, things like that. And yeah, there's also us with ARGcast. So be sure to find us on iTunes, subscribe, give us 5 stars, and tell your neighbors. We're also on Stitcher and also Google Play Music. So there's absolutely no reason to not listen to the ARGcast. And yeah, again, that's ARGcast episode 91 in the books. Until next time, keep it retro.
Now go watch Batman Forever on Netflix because nipples.
It all comes back to nipples, doesn't it? Just a
They'd
full
be like,
circle.
hey.
Yeah, it's full circle, just like a nipple.
Nipples.
Yeah, Mr. McD, the pirates are coming after my nipples again. Stop it.
Nipple diver!
The dark nipple returns.
We should probably stop there before things get too hard around here.
Heyo.
Hey, see you guys next week.
Catch you later.